Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour coming to you from Tiohtià:ke, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. I'm Yves Engler. Foreign Policy Hour, of course, is a critical look at Canada's role abroad, and we should be calling it the Foreign Policy Half an Hour because we've cut into our time here for a little bit while we're doing this regular Monday meeting with the NDP leadership campaign. So I'm going to get right to it because I don't have a lot of time. And the first thing is this report from Mike Hudima, prominent environmentalist, about over 1 million species facing extinction. Just about within the next few decades, the multiple crises, ecological. Another story about the exposure to extreme climate events. Somebody born in 1960 versus in 2020, there'll be 2 to 7 times more experiences of extreme climate events. So again, further information of the climate crisis and Canada's outsized contribution to that. There's a story in the Globe business section, I believe, about Scotiabank's global wealth management, and it's about $396 billion in assets. It's just a sign of how important of global players Canadian banks are. It's I think all of the big five are in the top 60 global banks, and RBC is around the 12th biggest or something like that in the world, and they all have major assets globally. And Canada, of course, is a major capitalist power globally. We don't necessarily discuss that very much, but it is. There's a story about the M23 killing a whole bunch of people in at least over 140 largely ethnic Hutu civilians in 14 different villages, maybe as many as 300. This was reported on by Human Rights Watch a couple days ago. And of course, Canada has been very sympathetic to Paul Kagame as he's unleashed endless horrors in Eastern Congo. And those continue, even though there's ostensibly an agreement. The horrors continue from the M23, which is really just a Rwandan proxy. The Globe had a story maybe Tuesday or Wednesday about the dark vessel technology, dark vessel. Anyways, it's Canadian detection technology that is helpful for illegal fishing, but it's also helpful for monitoring other countries' military. Now, a few months ago, they signed an agreement with the Philippines on this, and it was understood as this was sort of part of this U.S. militarization of the Philippines as part of competition with China. Now, this week, they signed an agreement with Taiwan. And so this is a dual use technology. And it's a formal agreement with the government. So, of course, Canada doesn't recognize Taiwan. It supports the one China policy. Obviously, Beijing views Taiwan as just a breakaway province. The Canadian government's position is sort of somewhere in between that and recognizing Taiwan. So signing a military accord agreement essentially is, of course, viewed as some degree of an escalation, or would not be well viewed by the Chinese government. Today's Globe had a big long story about a report from number of done between the University Ottawa and I think the Calgary policy, but with that Beatty, who was the head of he was a top military guy. He was a minister because I think it was a conservative minister, had been around a whole bunch of corporate lobby group positions. He headed up the Business Council of Canada, or I forget which one of the corporate lobby groups, but prominent, pro-American business guy, militarist. And the point of the story, or the point of this report that they just released is, or at least I just read the Globe story, so I didn't read the whole report, is kind of putting the whole Canada's relationship with China into a bit of a different perspective. And one of the things in the Globe story says the report warns against veering too far from Washington on China, or alternatively, marching in lockstep with the US. And it quotes the report saying, conspicuous independence in Canada's China policy risks retaliation from Washington. Too much alignment risks compromising Canadian sovereignty and efforts to diversify our global economic partnerships. So the Globe framed it as this important establishment report saying that basically we should do more business with China. So going against what's been the dominant position in the Globe and Mail. Uh, but the report itself makes it clear that they don't really want to, you can't really, from their perspective, from a very power serving perspective, don't be too independent. Don't try to be too independent from Washington on China, because then you're going to get backlash from Washington. So it's probably reading the article. It seems like a good assessment of the power relations as they are, but not necessarily with too much of an ethical or moral thinking, uh, and also whether it's worth it for Canada to break away from its historic subservience to Washington, all of its different accords from the Five Eyes to NORAD to NATO, whatever, that end up sort of subordinating or allying Washington, Ottawa so closely with Washington, whether that's a good thing to, it's worth taking a bit of pain in the short term as part of moving away from that for all kinds of both corporate reasons, ethical reasons, geostrategic reasons. So it doesn't really get into that from what I can tell, but nonetheless, it pushes back a little bit against this demonized China, and there clearly is more and more of the corporate class in Canada that with Trump's unreliability, they are starting to push back against this target China, follow the US in targeting China, while the US is talking about annexation, launching trade war, et cetera, et cetera. I wrote a piece that started off with the NDP's position on Jimmy Lai, the Hong Kong billionaire, who was clearly very treasonous from the standpoint of Beijing, of course, and from the standpoint of Hong Kong, much of Hong Kong. He called for sanctions on Hong Kong officials and mainland Chinese officials, and um, and called on the U.S. to basically, said that basically framed himself as working with the U.S. to undermine the Chinese government. Anyways, he's been in jail for a few years, and the Canadian or the NDP MPs have been really big supporters of him. But then I contrast that with their position on Marwan Barghouti, who came in the news a few days ago because Ben Gvir went to meet him and tried to humiliate him, and so basically they talk about releasing this billionaire who's this really right-wing billionaire, pro Washington, but they never talk about releasing Marwan Barghouti, and I use that as a staging off point, I guess, to discuss the NDP's position on China and how it's been not just subservient to Washington and wrong morally, but also I think an electoral mistake. I think that's becoming clearer and clearer, and there's polling that shows that. I think I may have talked about it in previous episodes, but the public is particularly younger people are becoming much less hostile to China in light of their hostility towards Donald Trump. Now on, of course, Carney was in Kiev and is being really hawkish, talks about not excluding putting troops, Canadian troops on the ground as part of some security agreement. He made a declaration. Carney said, Putin has broken his word repeatedly from Minsk to this morning. Putin has caused this terrible tragedy that has claimed the lives of millions. Putin menaces your skies, threatens your cities, destroys your fields. Putin has stolen your children. But Putin can be stopped. Russia's economy is weakening. He is becoming more isolated, and our alliance is hardening, Carney told the crowd. Now, of course, there's lots of truth in there, but there's also lots of deception in there. And the notion it's just Putin is obviously part of that, and the notion that Canada didn't play an important role in provoking and stoking this tension is left out of the discussion, and the notion that the alliance is hardening, in fact, it's weakening, and this is just basically rhetoric, not just rhetoric, because there is money behind it, and announced a whole bunch more money for weapons to pay for weapons. Canada providing another couple $1 billion on that front. But this is about just continuing, prolonging this fight to the last Ukrainian that Canada pushed to start, has pushed to continue when there was possibility of off ramp. Now to get out of this situation is even harder. Clearly, the Russian government is feels it has the upper hand, is not going to make life easy for Zelensky or the Ukrainian government, and it's a horrible situation, of course, but Canada wants to basically continue this, and it's working. I would say quite clearly working against the now tiptoeing a bit, but working against the elements of the Trump administration that have a desire to get out of this conflict. Now, of course, much of the Trump administration, I don't believe, is very supportive, and much of the Republican Party and U.S. establishment, of course, want to prolong the proxy war, and but Carney's clearly siding with those factions. I think ultimately for the detriment of Ukrainians long term, but time will tell on that. But I think to me it's increasingly clear by the day this is a disastrous situation for Ukrainians. It's also a disastrous situation for Canadians in the sense that it's more and more money for the war machine. This is part of justifying that. And there's just more and more stuff about this. BC government, big plan to expand defense industry. Politico has another story about Melanie Joly running around the world and trying to bolster the military industrial complex in Canada. She's the new industry minister. And she talks about all the different parts of the federal government, from Canadian Commercial Corporation, Canadian Space Agency, Research National Research Council, or whatever it's called, to become more militarized. And there's Canadian companies with these deals. Rochelle, there's a deal Rochelle announced with EU around ballistic steel. So we're really going through this whole militarization, and a huge amount of public resources going to the military machine to the detriment of social well-being in this country, most obviously with the housing crisis. Another development this week that's worth noting is the Bob Rae. So the Americans sanctioned one of the Canadian judges on the International Criminal Court. Prost is her name, and Bob Rae tweeted about it, condemning the U.S. action, and then he deleted it, and so a lot of people talked about that. Clearly, somebody within the government, the minister or global affairs, reined him in, and so much for the whole elbows up business. Another thing, maybe we should have mentioned this a bit earlier, but there was two things on sort of Ukraine Canadian military worth mentioning. One, there was a 5 soldiers that were suspended for their Nazi salute. And we're seeing a lot of these stories. I mean, I talk about it in detail in the book, the whole history of the far right in the military, Came out in Somalia. It's come out a few years ago about the far right. A few weeks ago, a few months, last 6 weeks, there's a whole series of stories. Another instance of this, of these soldiers giving Nazi salute, and it's not. I mean, it's a big institution, and it would be a little bit unfair to just paint the whole institution with this sort of far right, authoritarian brush. But it is a authoritarian institution. That's very clear, and it's a racist. It has a very clear white supremacist history, and it's a very obviously very patriarchal institution as well. Fundamentally, it's an authoritarian institution, and there is a big kernel of rightist and including far right disposition in the military that shouldn't be sort of wiped under the carpet. But the other thing on kind of associated with that is there's a story in the Globe talking about the Baltic Federation of Canada, which was set up in 1949, representing the diaspora communities of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And it talks about how they work with the Central European Canadian groups to promote the Black Ribbon Day, which is this anti-communist gets down the path of whitewashing the Nazis thing. And I didn't know I didn't know that the Baltic Federation dates back all the way to 49. Obviously, there's all this post-World War II influx of those who allied with the Nazis or fought with the Nazis coming to Canada. But this gives another little bit of detail in that direction, with it being set up in 49. And we've seen lots of that with Ukrainians and other Eastern European groups. Moving along, Canadian ambassador trying to deepen ties between Canadian and Israeli academics amidst the horrors in Gaza. And obviously, the Israeli universities are deeply tied into the war machine in Israel. There was this instance, there was a statement signed at a bunch of countries, 27 or something like that, this coalition of like sort of journalism freedom coalition. And Canada failed to sign the statement initially. That was Canada co-founded the Media Freedom Coalition. And it's signed dozens of these statements from this organization, and it refused to sign its statement about journalists entering Gaza and protecting and journalists being protected in the Palestinian territories. And it did sign it a day later after there was a bunch of media attention and blew up, whatever. So they did then sign it. But the fact that was the initial disposition, and you saw last night again, Israel's killed 5 more Palestinian journalists. I mean, it's just mind-numbing. It's absolutely mind-numbing what Israel's doing, what's getting away with, and just more of this. There's a story in Mondoese about these 70 Palestinian students who've been admitted to Canadian universities that are trapped in Gaza. And this person posts about it. One of the students, a University of Alberta student that I saw their tweet about it, about the article, and about how University of Alberta doesn't raise. One of their students got killed. I think it was there's a twins that got killed. I think it was University of Regina. They were accepted to, but apparently there's a University of Alberta student that was also accepted University of Alberta student who was also killed. And this goes on, and the government does almost the universities don't seem to do anything. The government won't. They'll let lots and lots of Israeli. They've let 10,000 plus Israelis come to Canada on these special visas, but those who are being holocausted and who've even got acceptance to Canadian universities, they make it impossible for them to get out of the country. Now, shifting gears to I talked about this last week. This smear attack against me that really picked up with these leftist, whole bunch of people on the left, most overwhelmingly white Almost no Palestinians, from what I can tell, or Arabs for that matter, who seem to have joined in on it. But there's all these denunciations. People like Judy Rebick calling me an anti-Semite. Uh, I don't remember exactly what I talked about last week. It got started by this guy Ben Marilinski, I think's his name, something like that. Toronto leftist group. I don't know much about him. Started with some seemed like some beef with Socialist Caucus that asked me to run for the NDP leadership. And then it just sort of spiraled into a bunch of all these different attacks. An email that I wrote 9 years ago, a response to this I don't know, she would call herself anti-Zionist, but I don't call her liberal Zionist or anyways. But this email gets released in this very odd fashion, clearly all part of some sort of whether it's somebody in the Avi Lewis camp of the NDP or whether it's sort of Israel lobby type or whatever. I don't know where it's all coming from, but there's a whole thing, and then a whole bunch of leftists get involved in it. And in it, I stand by I stand behind what I've written. I don't I don't I mean, I'm like, these are articles on my website. People can check the articles out. People can, if you want to parse, is this a little bit is the title a little too hard line? Is there a turn of phrase here that's not perfect? I don't know. You can get into all that, whatever, right? I mean, they don't, none of this happens on all the other things you write about or I write about, and it's the prioritization of Jewish sensitivities amidst a Holocaust, an effort to cleanse or kill all non-Jews from Gaza. It's odious that there would be this prioritization of Jewish sensitivities in Toronto or wherever in Canada amidst that context, but it is what it is. But I'll just give you a sense of like how wild some of this stuff gets. There's this person, I don't have her quote, but she says this email from 2016 that I sent I think I might have mentioned this last week. She says the most anti-Semitic document she's seen in Canada. I mean, you can go through it all. I'm not going to get into all of it, but I mean, it's comedy. Okay, but another part of this comedy, there's this person, Dara Teitel, Teitel, and she works for CUPE. She works for CUPE in some gig. I was told that she's close advisor of Joel Harden, the NDP MPP in Ottawa. I don't know if that's true, but this is what I was told. This is what she wrote, and this is under her own name. She's not like hiding this. 100%. Eve Engler scares me, like he's making me and my family more and more unsafe every day. Truly, I'm anti-Zionist, but it doesn't matter in this context. You can't fight racism with racism. I'm making her family unsafe. Okay, now leaving the wildness of that aside, as Palestinians are slaughtered left and right, like leaving the wildness of that, she does this a couple days after I published a story about how my address was doxxed by Dahlia Kurtz and people close to Dahlia Kurtz, where I have two young children. And the idea that she would say I'm making by me being hardline critic of the different Jewish Zionist organizations in the country, or pushing back against absurdities like Martin Lukash saying that there's no religious or ethnic no element in explaining Canada's anti-Palestinian media bias. The fact that the notion that I'm making her family unsafe when there's literally somebody who got me, jailed for 5 days, who then releases a defamation suit with my address on it, releases it to outlets that go out of their way to dox me is let's just say a little bit much. But of course, the whole thing is a little bit much. It's bananas. It's completely, utterly self-absorbed, and it's again the prioritization of Jewish sensitivities amidst the Holocaust. But this is where we're at, and amidst this whole kerfuffle, there's this weird person. I don't know who this person is, but just went totally wild in posting about this guy McCormack or something like that is his name. I forget. He apparently he stopped me from being able to see his Facebook stuff anymore. I don't know why. I never responded to him, but just to give you a sense, the most racist part of anything that's been revealed in this whole thing, everything they accuse me of or this or that, far and away the most racist thing that's stated in any of this, that passes with barely a comment. This is what this guy McCormack says. I've always taken my cues on Israel Zionism from Jewish anti-Zionist critics like Chomsky, Zinn, Salutin, Klein, Avi Lewis, and Rebick. Judy Rebick. As a non-Jew, I grew up hearing anti-Semitism in Christian white non-Jewish spaces, and it made me wary of non-Jewish critics of Israel whose stance sometimes came from anti-Jewish sentiment. And then he goes on or whatever. That, what I say, it's the most racist. It's a deep erasure of Palestinians. This person says he takes his direction on this issue from Jews, completely wiping out Palestinians. I mean, it's just, and this passes with like that Ben Marilinski sees it. He's sort of smart enough to understand how racist it is, but he just says, "Oh yeah, we should also include some Palestinian voices." There's no like denunciation. How dare you post this deeply racist thing? The denunciations are only directed my way, for being for exposing the different Jewish Zionist institutions and those who are providing cover. Again, this is amidst the killing fields. It's stunning to see it continue, but it is what it is. And it tells us a lot about the chauvinism, quite frankly, of Canadian society, the racism, the deep anti-Palestinian racism of Canadian society, that even deep into left circles, this is where people are at in basically 2 years into this Holocaust in Gaza. But it's disconcerting. And also, I should say, the whole like kind of big picture here is they're trying to basically block me from running an NDP leadership race. So including these people like who frame themselves as far left, right? So basically they're like trying to narrow out the NDP leadership race to like, Leah Gazan or Avi Lewis as the most left wing of the potentials, right? So it's the idea that these people who call themselves anti-capitalist or whatever are engaging in this the effective, well, they don't state explicitly. Judy Rebick says, "Oh, I believe you have the right to run," but you know that in practice, what she's doing is bolstering the right wing NDP forces that are trying to block me from running. I guess I'll leave it at that. One final thing is, Journal de Montréal had a story about the case, the depot separating from the Bronfmans. They have 200 million, at least 200, so 200 to 600 million in investments from the Bronfmans in Israel and they're divesting of that in response to the campaign. So that's a kind of, I think, a victory of the campaigning here in Montreal that's been going on. There was a really good demo at General Dynamics, PYM demo at General Dynamics, a facility here where they're doing the cartridges, still selling the cartridges for Israel. Yeah, I guess I basically at 6:28, we got to get onto the other one. So I think I'm going to not have any questions again this week. I apologize for that. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. And thanks everyone, and anyone who wants to come to the volunteer meeting. It's following. There's a couple new developments. And the campaign is still moving despite all these attacks. And these attacks is really clear are a response to the fact the campaign is moving. It's clearly threatening all kinds of different people. And I think there continues to be lots of possibility to rattle a lot more cages. And yeah, thanks everyone. And same time, same place next week. Take care.